So Al-Asfahani then goes on to tell us that Badal was a dharifa. And I want to dedicate the remainder of my remarks to this concept of dharaf, which to me is mind-blowing, particularly in the ways it informs our contemporary theoretical debates on whether sexual behavior produced identities prior to the 19th century, and whether there were minority communities that were built up around sexual desire or not. So, this 9th century text about Badal also tells us that she was a dharifa, which is an Arabic word to say that someone is witty, has a good sense of humor. However, there's a 13th century text that actually explains that the word dharifa was a code word used among women who had sex with women so that they could identify each other. In this 13th century source, the male author further illuminates that there was a community of women who were known as the dharifat. This is not a lot of information for us. One line in a 9th century source and 2 paragraphs in a 13th century source. But here is the astounding and astonishing thing. How could the word dharifa, which was used in 9th century Baghdad by Al-Asfahani to refer to a woman who had sex with other women, still be in circulation and used in the same way among women in Morocco, which is a world away from Baghdad geographically and is now situated temporally 300 years in the future? How did the circulation of the code word dharifa persevere from one geographical context to another and across 3 centuries? By virtue of what unknown mechanisms of cultural continuity was this made possible? Have we been underestimating women who loved other women in the Arabic-speaking world of the first millennium? Have we been assuming that they had not the capacity for their own orally transmitted historicity, which simply was not duly preserved, since writing was predominantly a patriarchal dominion? Same-sex love and desire between women has existed in configurations that we have previously thought required modernity to be sustained. We previously assumed that women faced compulsory marriages invariably and inevitably. We might have assumed that sexual practices did not necessarily lead to identities constructed around those practices. And we might have assumed that exclusive practice, or even exclusive desire for members of the same sex, may have been shaped by 19th century pathologization and homophobia, if not the new economic superstructures of capitalism that led to greater social individuation. And perhaps all of these realizations are true, and yet paradoxically, that which contradicts each of them also reveals itself to be true simultaneously. I wrote Ruhum al-Najda in a struggle against the silence and the silencing. I wrote it to synthesize a decade of research that challenged the dominant theoretical trends I was trained in as a scholar. I wrote it to challenge the fundamentalist view, whether Eastern or Western, of Islam or the Arab world as single stable objects. I wrote it to remind the world that we, human beings, are so inextricably interlinked civilizationally, and that from the view of eternity, we're not that different. I wrote it to celebrate the universality of love and human connection, and to mourn the darkness of human nature.